This is Mad Sweeney. This is Cult Free Radio. And if before we get started on the topic and on more in-depth introductions, let's talk a little bit about the technology here on Ustream, because tonight is a little bit of an experimental show where I'm going to be learning on the fly. It's the first time I've done this live. I've done a couple of recordings that most of you probably listened to. But at this point, I'm trying to make sure I've got a handle on the social stream, the chat box, and to make sure that you all are hearing me and that I can read you when you have something to share. Excellent. I have a couple of people making comments already on the social stream, and one is logged in via Facebook, the other is logged in via Ustream, which answers one of the big questions I had, is if you don't have a Ustream account and you want to come on via AOL Instant Messenger login, or MySpace login, or Twitter, or Facebook, you can log in using those and still participate here in the Ustream TV social stream, which is basically a chat box that once you've said something, I believe there's a countdown before you can say something again, so that you don't just start typing like mad and take over the conversation, so to speak. So, looks like we're on, looks like we're working. We've got a bunch of viewers so far, and I'm happy to get started. On the preview recording, I introduced myself a little bit, but just in case not everybody's listened to that, I'll briefly go over some of that again, and recommend if you want more details, you can listen to that as well. My name's Mad Sweeney. I was involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses for over 4 decades, a little over 40 years, and I've spent the last approximately 3 years gradually working my way out of the organization. At this point, I feel emotionally and mentally and physically out, but there are still some ties, as many of you listening probably as well as I have family still in the Jehovah's Witnesses or whatever high control religious group you might be from. I'm doing this show because I enjoy participation in discussing these sort of issues and these things. I've done it on message boards, and at this point I'd like to thank a couple of message boards for allowing me to sort of advertise this show on their board. I know I don't like reading spam posts, and I was a little bit reluctant to post some spam posts. But anyway, Jehovah'sWitnesses.net, hyphenated Jehovah's Witnesses. That's Simon's board. Love it. That's kind of my online home. So thanks to the people there for letting me advertise this. Also, Jehovah'sWitnessesRecovery.com. That's Moxie's board, and they do some really good work there as well. I sort of view JWN as the Wild West of ex-Jehovah's Witness talk, and JWR as a sort of kinder, gentler, healing sort of spot. But anyway, that's my viewpoint of the two. But thanks to both for letting me advertise on there and spam this show. And when I looked around, there wasn't a lot of call-in shows or talk radio format for former or ex-cult members that really approaches things from a standpoint of psychology, or you might say a more secular viewpoint. Most of the stuff I could find that's talk radio type things for former Jehovah's Witnesses or former of other high control religious groups seems to still be religiously primarily Christian oriented. And while this isn't supposed to be by any means an un-Christian show, I want to approach it just from, especially tonight's show, from the angle of psychological research and what high control religious groups do, because I believe that's really the important tie between all sorts of groups that we consider cults. So since I've been extricating myself from Jehovah's Witnesses, I've read a lot, I've studied a lot, I've taken a psych class, sociology class, and I guess what I've derived from all the things I've read and viewed, which you can get more details on in the intro recording I made earlier this week, is that high control religious organizations or business organizations, they all violate what I consider some of the most basic psychological human rights, which includes the right to complete and truthful information, the right to think and analyze that information autonomously without pressure, the right to feel whatever emotions one naturally feels without threats of repercussions, and the right to choose one's own behaviors based upon thoughtful analysis and our own feelings of the information that we've received. So now we're rolling on Cult Free Radio, and I would like to discuss some of these things. Now, these four things I mentioned, information, thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, I learned a lot about these primarily from the book Combating Cult Mind Control, written by Steve Hassan, and some discussions about it on both of the aforementioned message boards. And so, with those discussions in mind, the psychology class I took, sociology, some of the experiments that have been done about social conformity and the way groups pressure one another, as well as Steve Hassan's book and many others, I'd like to focus on those four things. But before we get into that, and I'd like to hear from some of the people on the social stream as well, I would like to first talk about that word, cult. You know, we've named this Cult Free Radio, and a lot of people have a problem with the word cult. And part of the reason is because when you look it up in the dictionary, there's many different definitions for what it means, and many of those definitions are quite benign. But when you talk to the average person on the street about what is a cult, what do you perceive to be a cult, many times there are just a couple of characteristics that they key in on. Feel free to throw up on the social stream or the chat box, I've got them both open, what you run into when people mention the word cult. But people think what? David Koresh, Jim Jones, mass murder, mass suicide, a compound where the members live. They think about a single charismatic leader that is the unquestionable authority of the cult. People think of that leader doing things to the men and the women in the cult at will, taking advantage, molesting children. That's what they think of cults. And so a group that seems or appears mainstream, they say, well, that's probably not a cult because, hey, they're mainstream. They'd have been found out by the cops by now if they were a cult. But that word, cult, really, it can mean so many things, but that common definition of a charismatic leader with full authority who has access to the members' money, has power over their behavior, and sex whenever he wants it. That's almost universally true of cults, but from the research I've done, only at the beginning, only when the cult is founded. Cults are almost always founded by an individual charismatic leader who can get money out of the members, who does have fairly autonomous, unquestioned power over the members of the group. But usually what happens is the founder dies, and then the group either splinters into smaller groups who fade away and nobody ever hears from again. And then the group either splinters into smaller groups who fade away and nobody ever hears from again, or the group persists for a little while under a second leader and then fades away into fairly insignificant things, but eventually they're gone as well. Once in a great while, one of these religions that were established by a charismatic leader who passed away persists, and they continue on, and then there's another president or another leader of the organization, and then the organization grows. The organization gets to a point where, no, they're not all on one compound, because there's so many of them. There's too many members to be in one compound. The organization grows to the point where perhaps the second leader passes away, and then a third leader comes along. But by that time, the third leader probably doesn't have the chutzpah or the charisma or the business acumen or the sort of oracle quality that some of the earlier ones had, and so he starts delegating stuff. He might be just lazier. And so things get spread out, and the organization becomes more of a bureaucratically run organization. And so the organization becomes the leader. And so at this point, you've got too many members to keep in a single compound. You've got no single charismatic leader, but you've got an organization that's the unquestioned authority and leader. Does that get this group off the hook for being a cult? Just because it's evolved structurally and administratively? Not if it's still doing the same things it's always done, and more so. As has been mentioned by a couple of people in the social stream, Mormons, the same thing happened. Jehovah's Witnesses, the same thing happened. Worldwide Church of God, the same thing happened. Scientology's moving that way too. They still have a fairly powerful leader, but when he passes away, the bureaucracy is going to keep running itself. So a few of these cults don't die when their founder dies. They keep going. But that does not mean, just because there's no longer a charismatic leader or a compound where everybody lives, that the group's no longer dangerous. It doesn't mean it's not a high-control group that we shouldn't call a cult anymore. So when I use the term cult now, this is the type of group we're talking about. Keep that in mind. We're not talking about a mainstream sort of group. We're looking at a group that nowadays tries to be mainstream. They try to look mainstream to the public. But as we talk about these things, you'll see that they still do things that are dangerous. For instance, well, let me emphasize this again. It's not the doctrine. It's not the beliefs. Just because you believe something differently, that's not what makes you a cult or a cult member. In fact, some high-control groups do have fairly mainstream sort of doctrines. It's what this organization does. And what they do is manipulate information, they control information, to manipulate your thoughts and feelings to get the behavior they want out of you as a member and as a recruit. Because the end game for them is controlling the members and recruits' behavior, and the behavior they almost universally want is donate your money, donate your time, work hard to recruit new members to donate their money and donate their time. So that's really the end game behavior that they're shooting for. And the other three things, information, thoughts, and emotions, are what the organization manipulates and controls in the recruits, in the members, to get them to behave the way they want. Oftentimes the acronym for those four is BITE because it's easy to remember, BITE. But I'd like to start with I, with information control. What could you tell me about the ways an organization tries to control information for its members? Let's start with members first, and then we'll go on to recruits. What types of information would a cult tell their members that they can or cannot take in? For instance, let me ask, if Jehovah's Witness went into the Kingdom Hall on Thursday night and told the elders, yeah, on Saturday, Mad Sweeney's going to have cult-free radio on Ustream, I think I'm going to listen to that. What do you think the response would be? Would that be information that they would be welcomed to be allowed to listen to or to be involved in? Yeah, I don't think so. People who are in cults are told you can't read non-cult literature. Basically, they're told, read this literature from our organization, do not read stuff from ex-members, don't talk to ex-members, because ex-members are what? Ex-members are from the devil. They get like Bobby Boucher's mama, and they tell you, it's from the devil. Cult-free radio, from the devil. And so members are afraid to even approach information from outside the organization. And so that's one way information is controlled. They're not supposed to read former members' blogs, see their YouTube videos, listen to their live radio shows. They don't want info from former members reaching current members, as one of our listeners has just brought out. And they're labeled as apostates. One of these weeks, I'd like to do a show talking about language and what's called loaded language, because the term apostate and the term worldly and the term disfellowship, lots of cult terms are loaded with extra meaning beyond just the dictionary definition. They're called, former members are called demon-inspired, possessed. This July's Watchtower magazine, in the Kool-Aid edition, the study edition of the July Watchtower, I think uses the phrase, and someone can confirm this if they've got it with them, I don't have it right in front of me, mentally diseased for people who have left the Jehovah's Witness cult. And so, by saying all these things, they're scaring people, which we will touch on fear as well when we get to the emotion section. But they're restricting information, and by only showing the one side of the story, then the cult members are, well, they're kind of only hearing the story that the cult wants them to hear. And so they're not getting complete information. And as I said early on, the right to complete and truthful information and making decisions for your life, to me, that's a basic human right. To hide half the story from people is a major violation. And so that's one thing that cults do to their members. Also, another way they kind of emphasize getting cult information is, how many times have you heard or read the word regular? Regular meeting attendance, regular Bible study, regular preparation, regular service. They want you to be in such a habit of going to these sessions where you only get their viewpoint, where you only get this information, that not only do you not want or you fear other information, you don't have time to get other information. I mean, 3 years ago at 20 after 10 on a Saturday night, I'd have been cramming to get my Watchtower study prepared. I'd have already prepared it early in the week, but I'd be working on it so that I could get ready to conduct the next day. And so you don't have time when you're fully engaged in these cult activities to get other information. So that's another way they control it. They monopolize your time, so you don't have time to gather outside information. And as far as just information in general, for instance, the June Watchtower has yet another article dogging higher education as something scary, as something that is dangerous. Education is dangerous. Now, if that's not wacky, I'm really not sure what is. I mean, if you go up to anybody on the street, like The Tonight Show does, and say, describe higher education in one word, is there anybody that you would run into that says, dangerous? Well, a Jehovah's Witness, maybe. And that's about it, really, isn't it? I mean, I can't think of anybody but a cult that would fear information and that would say information and education is dangerous. And so cults kind of demonize higher education. They demonize former members. They basically demonize any source of information that's not the cult itself. And they do this to their members, and they also do it pretty quickly. And they do this to their members, and they also do it pretty quickly. They start hammering on the new recruits. For instance, when you recall back, if you're a former cult member, that you were on a Bible study, or even maybe back when you were a Bible study, one of the first things you tell your Bible study as a cult recruiter is, you know what? Your family is going to oppose this Bible study you're having, right? Isn't that what they tell them? They say, Satan doesn't want you learning about our cult. Well, they don't say cult, but they say Satan doesn't want you learning this truth from the Bible, and he's going to send your family after you to try to talk you out of this study. See, what they're doing is they're trying to restrict your information, and they're setting themselves up as a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because, of course, your family's going to oppose you joining a cult. If they care about you at all, yeah, they're going to say, have you checked out that organization? And so it's really, they get the recruits pretty much from day one. And so, great. We've got a reference for the mentally diseased quote. It is in the July 15th Watchtower of 2011. So if you want to check that out, you can. Another great point. Cult members are pushing their literature, their information. But if a Bible study has some information from their own church or even their own school or any organization or even their own information, if it runs counter to the cult information, the cult member won't accept it. They're Jehovah's Witnesses and all the other cults that we mentioned earlier, they're not going to accept literature from an opposing viewpoint. So information also is withheld from the new recruits. If you ask a really good question that sort of tweaks the cognitive dissonance of your Bible study conductor, what's their stock answer? I'll do some research and get back to you on that, right? So they may do the research and get back to you on it, and more likely they'll just kind of let it hang and hope you never ask them about it again, because they really don't want to know. They're programmed to not want this information that goes against them. So recruits and members are under information control. Now, before we move on to thought control or emotion control, I mentioned cognitive dissonance a minute ago, and I'd like to talk about that just a little bit. As human beings, we constantly are taking in information both in a focused way. When we study, we analyze, we examine something, and it's kind of in a general non-focused way via our senses, just through daily experience. Now that information we take in goes into our brains, and we think about it, we feel a certain way about it, and we behave in some way based on it. Now those three parts of us, our thoughts, emotions, and behavior, they like to be in agreement with one another. It gives us security, gives us comfort, it gives us confidence when our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all in agreement with each other. And if you go to Wikipedia and search cognitive dissonance, there's a pretty good article there on that. When you're finished reading that, I would also highly recommend looking up confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is one of the big ways that cognitive dissonance is dealt with. So we like to have our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors all in accord. Everything's cool then. Now, when one of these is not in agreement with the others, you just don't feel right. You feel kind of uneasy. You feel like you got to get everything straight. That uneasiness is cognitive dissonance. And we do not like feeling cognitive dissonance, and we'll work to resolve it. And the way we work to resolve it is to bring our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors back into alignment as quickly as we can. Now, the classic example they use in freshman psych class involves smoking. And so imagine somebody's a smoker. He smokes a pack a day or two. He likes it. He feels good when he smokes. It calms him, and it helps him to not be grouchy. He also thinks that, yeah, there are some health risks with smoking, but it helps me stay thin, and There's health risks with obesity, so it's basically a trade-off. I'm good to go. But then there's this ad campaign that shows disgusting pictures of a smoker's lungs. It shows appeals from children who maybe lost their parents to cancer, all sorts of new information that might affect the smoker's feelings. That may or may not influence him. But then his or her child comes toddling in, crawls up on the lap and says, "Daddy, I don't want you to die. Can you quit smoking?" Well, now the smoker's feelings have changed. He still knows the same information about smoking. He's got all the same thoughts in his head about the data of cancer. He still is able to smoke. The behavior hasn't changed yet. Nobody's taken the cigarettes away. So thoughts and behavior are status quo, but the feelings are changed. The smoker now has cognitive dissonance. One of the things are out of alignment. So what does the smoker do? Well, if it only happens once, the toddler comes in, begs him to quit, he could probably blow it off, go back to feeling the way he's felt all along, keep smoking, and stay in balance between thoughts, emotions, and behavior. But if his child's in a fairly regular, persistent, and consistent state of despair, with tears and depression, and the weight of sadness that the child feels influences this parent, this smoker, every day, well, his thoughts will start to change to, "Smoking hurts the people I love." His feelings will change, "I hate that." And so he'll start to reconcile his thoughts with his feelings, and he'll reconcile his behavior with his feelings by quitting smoking. And so now his thoughts, behavior, and feelings are lined up again, except now he's a non-smoker. So that's just an illustration that is kind of how cognitive dissonance can work. But the key was the child was persistent and consistent in working at influencing this smoker's feelings. A one-shot deal doesn't work. Going to one cult meeting isn't going to make you a member. Having one Bible study isn't going to necessarily recruit you into becoming a member. The regularity of it, the repetition, will change either your thoughts or your feelings, or even maybe just your behavior, so that you will bring the others in line. And that's how they draw people in. That's how cults get people, by using cognitive dissonance. So this is important. It's important to notice here that it doesn't have to be all three. A cult recruiter only has to effectively change one by being consistent and persistent with their feelings or their thoughts or their behaviors. And then the recruit, once one of those changes, will either have to stop the study and get out, or if they keep studying, they're going to have to change their behaviors and their feelings to become a full-fledged member. So it goes one way or the other. One of the books I mentioned in the intro that I had recorded earlier in the week was Mistakes Were Made, But Not By Me, written by Carol Tavris and Elliot Aronson. And it's a book that talks about cognitive dissonance and the ways that people mentally justify their mistakes, which is something that really applies a lot to current members who are faced with information that shows them problems and issues with their cult experience. So Mistakes Were Made But Not By Me is a highly recommended book that can really help you get a handle on this. And the good part about that book is it's not about religion per se. It's really about psychology and the way our human mind works and our behaviors work to justify the things that we do. So we've talked about information control so far, and we've talked about how cognitive dissonance works. How about thought? What about some ways that an organization might try to control, influence, or manipulate the thinking of its members? And if you think back to when you might have been a member, there's certain types of thinking that are demonized, so to speak, that are criticized, that cult members are warned about avoiding, especially from the viewpoint of making certain types of thinking demonistic or satanic. And what I'm thinking of right now is independent thinking. There are whole subheadings in study articles, there are whole articles even, on warning against the dangers of independent thinking. And so independent thinking, while those of us who are living a normal life, having a life where we value the freedom of mind, the freedom of thought, and the freedom of our own autonomous direction, just the idea that independent thinking is dangerous, is satanic, seems sort of weird. And looking back, it's hard to believe that we were ever afraid of it. But this is the type of things that cults do. They warn people, look, we have an organization that's connected to and in tune with God, and we know what's best, so you really need to think the way we want you to think. And it scares people into, whenever they start thinking something a little bit different, oftentimes the guilt convinces them to run to the elders and say, you know, I've been thinking these ideas, I've read this information, and it's influenced how I'm thinking, and they get what they call readjusted. And other cults do something similar, I'm sure. Some of them more harsh than others. So, independent thinking. At this point, I would like to also mention that if you would like to speak on the show with your voice, a lot of people have posted to the chat and to the social stream, and I've tried to mention the comments that I've seen there. But if you want to speak, throw a note up on the social stream, and I'll see what I can do here to get your voice on the air. Since we haven't tried that yet, it might be something fun. Another excellent point that a commenter has just made about self-censoring one's own thinking. A cult member is often told, or often sort of programmed to, when they start to see or experience information that goes against or is run somewhat contrary, or perhaps even merely questions occult teaching, they do something called thought stopping. They immediately put up a defensive barrier mentally and don't even go there. It's interesting, somebody mentioned thought crimes. There is a book that was written by a former Jehovah's Witness, I believe sometime in the late 60s or early 70s, that was about how Orwellian the Watchtower organization is. And I'm not exactly certain if it's still in print, but I have run across it in the library. I believe it was called The Orwellian World of the Watchtower, or The Orwellian World of Jehovah's Witnesses. But there are things like called thought crimes in 1984. If you think the wrong thing, you're programmed to believe that that's a criminal act. And it's very similar in cults. If you think the wrong thing, you're programmed to feel guilty over it. And so that, I guess, kind of leads us into the next level here of the different controls, and that is feelings. Because feelings are very powerful, and there are two main emotions that cults use to exercise control over their members. Those are fear and guilt. And both of those have been mentioned. Afraid of apostates, afraid of independent thinking, guilty when you have independent thinking, guilty for talking to apostates. So fear and guilt are really powerful tools that cults use to control. The, not necessarily metaphor, I guess, the analogy of the carrot and the stick. The stick is the fear and the guilt, and the carrot is, well, everlasting life, pet panda or lion, your choice, health, perfect health, a great picnic area with mountains in the background, snow on the mountains, no snow on your driveway, just what everybody likes, you know. Plenty of fruit and vegetables growing, plenty of people working the land, you know, very, you know, we've seen the pictures. So there's the carrot, and the stick is the fear and the guilt. So we've got emotional control, we've got thought control, we've got information control, and when a cult hits one of these, what happens to the member is they make the other ones fall in line. So, what could somebody do? Yeah, another big carrot that organizations use: resurrection to eternal life. And so, I think now is probably a good time, since we've mentioned in the last few minutes some things that are doctrinal and specific to Jehovah's Witnesses. And I mentioned it briefly earlier that it isn't doctrine that makes a cult. But cults can use doctrine to influence and control thoughts, feelings, information, and behavior. And so when we do mention different doctrines on this show, we're not really necessarily bashing the doctrine itself, because there may very well be non-cult, mainstream type religions who believe in the same doctrine. So resurrection, huge carrot, huge influence on the emotions of cult members, but a lot of non-cult religions believe in resurrection as well. So just to clarify that. But the end goal for a cult is to get their members to behave a certain way. And it's important for the members to fall in line, walk in sort of lockstep. And mentioned briefly earlier about loaded language. How about the word unity? Anyone remember hearing that occasionally? You couldn't go to an assembly or a meeting without hearing it, because walking in lockstep is huge for cults. They want everybody doing the same behaviors because it builds up group solidarity. It makes you feel like you're a part of something important. And if some people are recruiting, working hard, getting recruits, others will want to do the same because they're part of the group. And so that's really the end game behavior that they want. Pulling in more members and donating. Unity is uniformity. It's conformity. If you're on YouTube sometime, search for Ash's Conformity Experiment. And that's Solomon Ash, A-S-H-E. He did an experiment back in the 1950s or 60s, and I'm sure it could be replicated today, to test conformity. People do what their peers do, whether they want to or not, for the most part. So check that out on YouTube. I found it very educational. And standing out from the group is perceived as evil. And it's interesting what they do with unity. We have a comment that, I remember being impressed by the worldwide unity when I studied and was in the truth. Now I see it as cult-like. Yeah, because most normal people in the world value their independence. They value their freedom. They value independent thinking. And sometimes that does lead to conflict. When people disagree, well, there's disagreement. And so that sort of cult member mindset of, well, we're going to avoid disagreement at all costs by enforcing conformity and unity. Excellent. Old Japanese saying, the nail that sticks up will be hammered down. And that's exactly what happens. So the conformity is enforced. Standing out from the group is portrayed as dangerous at first. And if you persist in being an independent thinker, then you're shunned. Even if you're not disfellowshipped, you're shunned. By the way, I'm not disfellowshipped, but I'm pretty shunned. So that's the kind of thing that happens. Now, I'm more than happy to keep talking about cults and behavior, information, thought, and emotion control. But we have a sort of surprise guest. And if I can figure out how to get our surprise guest on here so that he can speak to us, he's going to introduce a topic that I'd like to talk about with the group in greater detail in a few weeks. It's about an ongoing investigation, an investigative report, I guess you might say, that's going on. And so, if I can, if you can give me like 5 seconds. No, it is not. Excuse me. You guys are awesome. No, it's not Johnny the Best Alive. Not Johnny the Best Alive. It's not Johnny the Best Alive. God, 3 different people. That's great. Let me see. Here we have, and I don't know if the this particular speaker wants to use his real name or what. I'm just going to give you his handle. It is Juan Viejo 2, and I believe he goes as Juan Viejo on JWN, Jehovah'sWitness.net. And we're going to have him on the show in a few weeks as this investigation he's doing right now progresses with a lot more detail. But are you here, Juan Viejo? How about now? Oh, I hate to leave everybody hanging like this. See, it looks to me like I've got you live, but I still don't hear anything. In the meantime, we can talk a little bit more about, just start talking whenever you're ready to talk, Juan. There are other methods for looking at cults and determining what a cult is, aside from the BITE method. And one that's been posted on JWN a lot of times are the 10 warning signs of a potentially unsafe group or group leader. These are really good. The poster on there who goes by the handle True1, Trueone, he's posted this several times. I'm not sure where it originates, but I want to at least try to credit somebody. I didn't come up with these myself, but I think they're great. One is absolute authoritarianism without meaningful accountability. And if we look at the leadership, past and present, of the Watchtower Society, the governing body is in control. People are told to obey the governing body, respect the chain of command via the circuit overseers and elders, but without meaningful accountability. They really don't answer to anybody. If you don't like the President of the United States, well, you can vote for somebody else in the next election. If you don't like your congressman, you can vote for somebody else in the next election. If you don't like your local school teachers, you can vote for a new school board who will hire different people. If you don't like the governing body, sorry. Get out of the cult. Find yourself shunned if you don't like it. It's either conform or not. Hey, we've just got a new member showed up. Thank you for the new listener. Still trying to get Juan to be able to talk. Yeah, who knows what's the deal there with Juan. But so that was number 1, absolute authoritarianism without meaningful accountability. So the 10 warning signs of a potentially unsafe group or leader. No tolerance for questions or critical inquiry. Of course, you don't question. You have to conform. 3, no meaningful financial disclosure regarding budget, expenses, such as an independently audited financial statement. When is the last time you've seen a Watchtower Society accounts report? Now, your local congregation, they have to do an accounts report and send it to the society. Your assembly has to send an accounts report to the society. And the society doesn't send any information to the locals about what's going on. And I don't know about in other countries, but in the United States, in fact, I think in some European branches they do have to file accounts reports for tax exemption purposes. But in the United States, I don't believe that's required. It's optional of religious organizations, and I'm pretty sure the society does not regularly do it. So no real financial disclosure. Anything we know about how rich the Watchtower Society is really based on estimates, because they just don't tell. We know they've got about $1 billion worth of real estate, and there have been some independent researchers who have done some investigations. As we've seen on the chat here, there was one in the mid-90s that shows an income of $1.24 billion. I'd be interested to know, I think I'm going to Google that, Dun & Bradstreet, to see how they got their data on the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of New York. But their income plus their property, easily $1 billion worth of property. Of course, things aren't really liquid in today's economy, but that could change in a month. You know, they could easily, and even if they wanted to sell off all their assets at deflated prices, they'd still be in really good shape. So anyway, financial disclosure is like pulling teeth, but we can get at it. Also, number 4. Unreasonable fear about the outside world, such as impending catastrophe, evil conspiracies, and persecutions. Crazy fear about the outside world. In fact, another thing that cults do is they create an unreasonable phobia in their members of leaving the cult. Members are so afraid of being in the world because they don't want to be controlled by Satan. They don't want to become mentally diseased. They want to be what they consider normal, which of course is only the cult normal. It's not really normal. So many of us, when we first got out into the real world, we were pretty scared too. It was we weren't sure what was going to happen. We weren't sure if these new feelings we were feeling meant that, oh my God, I don't have Holy Spirit anymore, or what it really meant, you know? What it really meant, though, if we stick it out and don't crawl back, is what it feels like to be free. And it's something that converts into a cult may remember, but those of us who were raised as members of Jehovah's Witnesses, we never felt before, and I'm just really glad that over the past few years I've been able to discover what it feels like to be free. To be free in my mind, to be free to raise my family, to be free to think. And so, yeah, it's a good feeling, and it's really hard to think back to those slave days. Number 5, there's no legitimate reason to leave. According to cults, former followers are always wrong in leaving. They're negative. They're even evil. But there is. This is just another fallacy promoted by cults. The reason to leave is so we can be free. It's so that our behaviors are not manipulated. It's so that our thoughts and our feelings are our own. Some who do leave, they really do have to crash and burn before they get back up. Sometimes they'll crash and burn and go back to the cult because it's the only support system they have. And related to that, I think most of us on here sort of know each other, at least in an internet fashion. We're all sort of online friends. And I think we don't always pat ourselves on the back enough for what we do online, the support we try to give to one another. Because members are programmed to fail outside the cult, because the whole time they're in, they have not built any sort of network of support, of friendship, of really any of the normal things that people take for granted. If they do have family that's not in the cult, they've alienated them while they were in the cult. And so that loneliness when people first come out is something that I think we all try our best to do a really good job of assuaging by being supportive online on these message boards, and hopefully through cult-free radio, as this will grow and evolve into something that becomes really helpful to people on a regular basis. So anyway, I just want to congratulate everybody for being free and for helping others as much as you can. It's not easy. And one of the freedoms, too, was mentioned, free from guilt. Free from that fear and guilt, once you finally get through that, is a really important thing. Back to the list, former members often relate the same stories of abuse and reflect a similar pattern of grievances. I think that kind of applies to the Watchtower. Although everybody leaves for different reasons, there are probably fewer than a dozen kind of different threads of how you got out, whether it's... I don't even want to list them. There's so many, because I don't want to leave somebody out who says, well, I left because of this. But sometimes it's doctrinal. Most of us on here consider ourselves, high-quality apostates, for lack of a better term. We know the ins and outs of the organization and what's wrong with it. But I think that, we tend to sometimes see within our own bubble and not always remember that a lot of the people who leave were kicked out for some behavior that goes against the rules and dictates of the cult, and they don't know all the things that are wrong with the organization. they still feel like they were wrong and that they're being justifiably punished. And so I think it's important for us to keep hammering away at that they still feel like they were wrong and that they're being justifiably punished. And so I think it's important for us to keep hammering away at that everybody is free to make their own choices in life, and that getting kicked out could be the best thing that ever happened to you, and for a lot of people it is. So let's keep being supportive. Also, number 7, there are records, books, news articles, or television programs that document the abuses of the group or its leaders. Well, yeah, Dateline, Silent Lambs, and the more websites, the better. The more talk radio we can do, the more internet radio we can do, the better. I mean, I know we're not talking to a huge audience here tonight. It's more like a coffee shop sitting around with a group of friends. But that's okay. I'm not going to go online tomorrow and talk about the thousands of people who were on Cult Free Radio. But I am going to say that I thought it was a good and productive conversation that we've been having tonight. I'm still showing Juan Viejo on the air here, but I still can't hear him, so I don't know what's going on there. Number 8. Here's a big one in Jehovah's Witness cult. Followers feel they can never be good enough. Yeah. Because you're not. You can't. Nobody can do perfectly all the things that these crazy cults demand, especially, at least from my experience, like Jehovah's Witnesses. So you're not good enough for them because you haven't given them 100% of your time. You haven't given them 100% of your income. Could you do more in the service to Jehovah's organization? How many times have we heard that baloney, you know? So, yeah, it's hammered away all the time. Could you do more? Are you doing all you can? Ugh. Just makes me want to punch my monitor just hearing myself say that. I've said that from the platform. Makes me sick. So that sort of, I'm no good, I'm not good enough, that low self-esteem is really important from the cult leader perspective. The leadership is happy to have followers with low self-esteem because they're not going to challenge what they hear. They're not going to critically think about what they hear. They're just going to be yes men. They're going to say yes and move on. And at some point on the show, I'd like to talk about that sort of dynamic of low self-esteem and how people are serving in positions of authority now who have really no critical thinking skills, no self-esteem, and they're being appointed as elders. It's really, I think it's kind of there's a brain drain going on in the organization, and there's really no way they can stop the bleeding. 9 and 10, I'm going to put these together so we can finish this list and talk some more about the future of this show and what we can do together to help people. The group leader is always right, and the group leader is the exclusive means of knowing truth, receiving validation, and no other process of discovery is really acceptable or credible. Aren't we told that all the time? Put your trust in the faithful and discreet slave. The governing body has provided this loving arrangement from Jehovah. Okay, who's it from? The governing body or Jehovah? Yeah, it's the same thing. And that's what they're telling to the people. Somebody mentioned earlier on the Ustream social stream, and it's kind of scrolled down off my page about meetups, and I'd quickly like to talk about that a little bit before we move on. There are more and more live meetups as well, here and there, and most use meetup.com, which can tie into your Facebook too, I guess, kind of like Ustream can tie into your Facebook. And so when new members of the meetup group, new people who are out of the organization can attend these, and we can grow them. I think that's a really positive thing as well. But I tell you, the online message boards really saved my bacon because I'm in a fairly rural area. Like I said, I'm not disfellowshipped, and I have family still in the organization. So I can't really come out locally at this point. I've made certain promises to family members who are in that I wouldn't do anything that would put them on the spot, or kind of put them in a situation where they have to choose. And I know I don't owe them that, but I gave my word, and so I'm going to stick to it. And so online meetups are really great for a guy like me, but the live meetups are awesome too. And I am going to one, which is going to be a pretty good drive away from here, so I'm pretty sure I'm not going to run into anybody from the Kingdom Hall. At King's Dominion, which is an amusement park that's between Richmond and Washington, D.C., on June 4th. The Richmond meetup group of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and the Northern Virginia meetup group of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses are going to converge on King's Dominion that day. We're going to meet each other and have a good time, hopefully, ride some roller coasters, bash the Borg, and do some other stuff. So that's one meetup. If you're within driving distance of the D.C. or Richmond area, come on over to King's Dominion on June 4th. It's also Deaf and Hard of Hearing Awareness Day, so there's going to be a lot of people using sign language around there. So that should be interesting as well. Someday I'll tell you all about my my sign language history, but not tonight. Little by little, keep the audience wanting more, right? All right, so we're not going to hear Juan tonight, but let me tell you what's going on. Juan's going to come on in a few weeks. We'll tell you the date when it's established. And he's going to update us on what's going on at a Kingdom Hall on the West Coast. I think it's in California, where it was not one of these halls that was built on society money and owned because of a Watchtower Society loan. And at this point, the organization has moved and shifted elders around and congregation members around, so that they can basically take over this Kingdom Hall and take over ownership, even though it was built decades ago by the brothers' money. And so that's just kind of a brief sort of summary of what's going on out there, and it's an ongoing story. It's really not cool what the Watchtower does. And as it turns out, the organization is has done this in a lot of other places, and what usually happens is all it takes is the circuit overseer to say, brothers, why don't you just sign this trust deed over to the Watchtower Society, and they usually do. But here in California, these brothers worked hard, their blood, sweat, and tears to get this place and to support it for decades with no help from the organization. Of course, when does the organization give any money? And so now they're fighting back a little bit. There's a lawsuit involved, and Juan Viejo has all the details. So we'll have him on to talk about it and give us an update on what's going on. He's given updates on his website, and there's going to be more updates pending. And so hopefully he and I can get on, and we'll do a couple of practice runs, make sure it all works, and maybe we'll talk to a couple of our audience members to be, practice audience members, to make sure we can get these bugs worked out. I feel like it's been a fairly successful... Juan, can you post the link to your website on the chat room? Here, the chat box. I believe... Yes, Juan's website is www.x-jw.com. And right now on Juan's website is a link to The Girl's Guide to Homelessness, which is written by an ex-Jehovah's Witness, our friend Brianna Karp. So I hope to buy that book soon, and well, she's busy with real media at this point, being on actual TV and actual radio. But at some point when the media blitz dies down, I'll see if I can get her on here, and we can talk as a kind of smaller, more intimate group about her experiences, her book. Maybe I'll even do some sort of contest or something. I don't know, give the book away. We'll see. I'm doing this on the fly, as you probably have figured out. It's kind of a work in progress, and what I would like to do now that we're kind of nearing the end of tonight's show, I don't have an actual scheduled end time, so if anybody wants to keep going, that's fine. But the fact that I can't get anybody else's voice on here kind of makes me feel like I'm monopolizing everything, and I'm getting to the point where I'm sort of rambling. If you could post, kind of makes me feel like I'm monopolizing everything, and I'm getting to the point where I'm sort of rambling. If you could post or private message me on JWN or on Facebook, or even feedback here to this show, what you think we could do to make the show better, what was good about the show, what you would like to see in the future as far as topics or format. Of course, the format, I'd like to be able to interview somebody or talk to some people, but so obviously I don't really need a post telling me get the technology fixed. I know that. I got that one. So if we could just get something constructive, or maybe even something that is critical, that's fine too. But realize, hopefully, I'm going to get a little more comfortable, a little bit more interactive. I like the chat interaction because I know a lot of people like to stay anonymous, and tonight I didn't mention any names even when I read somebody's comment. In the future, if you want to comment via chat, keep doing that like you did. If you want to be known by name, just let me know, and I'll say so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that. But otherwise, I'll use your comments anonymously. But I really would like to be able to allow people to speak. I'd like to allow people to get through so that we can all hear one another, at least the ones who want to be able to speak out. Because, radio is fine as a medium for a person to talk, but I really do want this to be a discussion. And it sort of was, but I do feel like I've talked a lot. And I feel like if we had more discussion, we probably could have gone 2 hours on that same topic or more. But we'll work on it. There's plenty of time, and like I said, there's no impending set schedule for when the next show has to be, and your Menlo Park show doesn't necessarily have to be the next show either. I mean, I can obviously I can ramble on for an hour about just about anything. So maybe I'll take some feedback from the listeners, some people who maybe couldn't listen tonight on JWN, JWR on Facebook, and get some ideas what to talk about next. And thank you, Juan. I see your note that you're going to try to work it out. And yeah, feedback. So give me some feedback on the show. Tell me what you thought. Tell me what we can do better, and we'll take it from there. I'm going to be pretty picky about who I allow on. That's kind of why this first show, I tried not to go spamming a bunch of sites that I'm not on much, because I don't know who's who. I feel like when I see the names that are popping up here, I recognize most of them either from Facebook or from JWN, and I'm almost glad it's not a free-for-all. I mean, if you could just hit *1 and talk, can you imagine the nightmare this place would be? Well, you don't have to imagine it. You've heard it before. So that's not what I want to do. I don't want it to be a Wild West free-for-all with just any hoaxer coming through. But I do want to be able to let audience members speak, and I think everybody has something of value to say. But apparently not tonight. It's not going to work out. But I think we've got it. I think it was a pretty good show. It was a good first crack at the whole thing. We got a few bugs out. We got the basics down. And hopefully, if y'all could try to spread the word and let people know that it's a venue where people can talk about the ex-Jehovah's Witness experience and other cults as well. I'm thinking of talking to some people from an ex-Mormon and ex-Scientology board. I've emailed them to see if they'd be interested. And maybe this will grow into something big, and maybe it won't. It might just stay a group of say core regulars, much like you get on the message board that just come and talk once in a while. But however it turns out, I think it's going to be good. I'm enjoying it. I've had a good time despite my sore throat this evening, and any venue possible to get the information out about the Watchtower cult and what it does to people is important. So I think I'm going to let you all go. People have been kind of logging off slowly but surely. Thank you all very much for listening and participating on the chat. I think that worked pretty well. I like the chat thing. So let me know what we can do, what we can talk about next time. What are you into? It'll probably, like I said, be a couple of weeks from now, and I will post the schedule online somewhere. So I'll be in touch. Thanks. This is Cult Free Radio. This is Mad Sweeney. I have one more question before we go. Am I considering video at all? I was hoping having less bandwidth by going straight audio would kind of save some technical difficulties. And another thing is, I'm reluctant to show my face at this point. And I know there are people who are going to think it's kind of cowardice to not use my real name, to not show my face. But I'm not ready at this point. I'm not going to get myself disfellowshipped and screw up my parents' life. So they don't want to have to choose between their witness family and their non-witness family. So we're just going to stay. What I'm thinking of actually is getting a V mask. You know, V from V for Vendetta, and maybe I'll wear that on the air. I'll think about that, and then we'll go video. You can look at V from Vendetta every week. So we'll see. I appreciate all the props. I appreciate the thanks, but I want to thank you all for listening. Scream mask. There's a winner. Maybe I'll do a different mask every week. Yeah, that could turn into a fun little kind of thing. So thank you, everybody. And I'm about to log off. So thanks for everything. I appreciate your support. I'll see you all online. I'm going to hit JWN right now and Facebook and see what's going on. And we'll talk again in a couple weeks. Take care, everybody. Mad Sweeney, Cult Free Radio. Good night.